Have you ever felt so broken that your prayers seemed to evaporate before they reached heaven? So consumed by suffering that even food lost its taste? In the ancient city of Jerusalem, around 586 BCE, smoke billowed from the temple as Babylonian forces reduced God's holy city to rubble. Amidst this devastation, an anonymous voice penned what we now know as Psalm 102, a prayer of the afflicted. What makes this psalm so remarkable isn't just its raw honesty, but how it bridges personal agony with collective hope. The answer lies in understanding that this ancient prayer wasn't just written for its time. It was written for all time, including ours. Jerusalem, 586 BCE. The unthinkable has happened. The city that King David established as Israel's capital nearly 400 years earlier lies in ruins. The magnificent temple built by his son Solomon is destroyed. The survivors of Nebuchadnezzar's siege face a 900-mile forced march to Babylon. Those who remain wander the charred streets, surrounded by evidence of divine judgment. One person, perhaps a priest, perhaps just an ordinary believer, sits alone. Their body wastes away from grief. Their heart burns within them. And from this place of absolute desolation comes one of the most honest prayers ever recorded. Hear my prayer, O Lord, let my cry come to you. Do not hide your face from me in the day of my distress. Incline your ear to me. Answer me speedily in the day when I call. The Babylonian exile represents the greatest national catastrophe in Israel's history until that point. The northern kingdom had already fallen to Assyria in 722 BCE, and now Judah had succumbed to Babylon. The prophets had warned for generations that continued idolatry would bring judgment, but nothing could prepare the people for the reality of seeing Jerusalem conquered. This historical context matters deeply for understanding Psalm 102. The psalmist wasn't merely experiencing personal suffering, though that was certainly real. They were processing theological catastrophe. If God had promised David an eternal dynasty, if he had chosen Jerusalem as his dwelling place, what did it mean that both the city and throne now lay in ruins? The psalmist begins by describing their personal anguish in vivid, embodied language. For my days pass away like smoke, and my bones burn like a furnace. My heart is struck down like grass and has withered. I forget to eat my bread. Because of my loud groaning, my bones cling to my flesh. Notice the visceral nature of this suffering. The psalmist experiences time itself evaporating like smoke. Their bones burn. Their heart withers like grass under scorching sun. Their appetite vanishes. Their body wastes away until they become like a desert owl, a lonely sparrow on the housetop. These aren't merely poetic metaphors. They're descriptions of trauma's physical manifestations. Studies show that extreme grief and stress trigger inflammatory responses in the body, affecting everything from appetite to sleep patterns. The psalmist intuitively captures what modern psychology confirms. Profound suffering is an embodied experience. But what makes this suffering particularly acute is the sense of divine abandonment. You have taken me up and thrown me aside. My days are like an evening shadow. I wither away like grass. The Hebrew word for throne here, shalak, is the same word used to describe how one might discard something worthless. The psalmist feels not just abandoned, but actively rejected by God. This theological crisis compounds their physical suffering. We see this pattern throughout Scripture. Job questioned God's justice. Jeremiah accused God of deceiving him. Jesus himself cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" from the cross. The biblical tradition never shies away from honest expressions of spiritual desolation. Yet remarkably, a shift occurs midway through this psalm. Verse 12 pivots from personal lament to cosmic hope. But you, O Lord, are enthroned forever. Your name endures to all generations. This transition represents one of the most profound spiritual movements in Scripture. Without denying or minimizing suffering, the psalmist lifts their eyes to God's eternal nature. They recognize that while their own life feels as transient as evening shadows, God's reality transcends their immediate experience. The historical setting becomes crucial again here. Jerusalem has fallen, but the psalmist declares that you will arise and have pity on Zion. It is the time to favor her. The appointed time has come. This isn't blind optimism. The prophet Jeremiah had specifically foretold that the exile would last 70 years. Jeremiah 29 verse 10. Isaiah had proclaimed that a Persian king named Cyrus would be God's instrument of restoration. Isaiah 44 verse 28. A prophecy fulfilled when Cyrus conquered Babylon in 539 BCE and decreed that the Jews could return home. The psalmist anticipates this restoration, declaring that the nations will fear the name of the Lord, and all the kings of the earth will fear your glory. This vision extended beyond mere architectural rebuilding. It pointed toward universal recognition of God's sovereignty. Consider the spiritual audacity of these statements. From the ashes of Jerusalem, the psalmist envisions a future where world powers acknowledge Israel's God. This hope sustained the exilic community through decades of displacement and formed the foundation for their eventual return. But the psalm doesn't stop with national restoration. It soars into cosmic dimensions. Of old you laid the foundation of the earth, and the heavens are the work of your hands. They will perish, but you will remain. They will all wear out like a garment. You will change them like a robe, and they will pass away, but you are the same, and your years have no end. These verses reveal a sophisticated theology of creation. The universe itself is portrayed as God's handiwork, yet even creation is subject to decay and transformation. Only God remains unchanging. This recognition places human suffering, even suffering as severe as exile, within a larger cosmic framework. The ancient Near Eastern context illuminates the significance of these claims. Unlike neighboring mythologies where gods were closely identified with natural forces, Israel's God transcends creation while remaining intimately involved with it. He is neither subsumed by nature nor detached from it. The New Testament writers recognize the messianic implications of this passage. Hebrews 1 verses 10 to 12 quotes these exact verses, applying them to Christ as the eternal creator whose unchanging nature contrasts with creation's transience. This Christological reading adds another dimension to the psalm's message of hope amid suffering. The final verses return to the communal perspective. The children of your servants shall dwell secure. Their offspring shall be established before you. Despite present suffering, the psalmist trusts in generational continuity. This statement reflects the covenant promises stretching back to Abraham, where God pledged to establish his descendants forever. Even in exile, these promises remain trustworthy. Archaeological discoveries confirm that the Jewish community maintained distinct religious practices during the Babylonian captivity. Clay tablets from Nippur document Jewish names and business transactions. The prophet Ezekiel ministered among the exiles by the Chebar Canal. Despite being removed from their temple, the people preserved their identity through Sabbath observance, dietary practices, and communal storytelling. When we step back and consider the psalm as a whole, we see a remarkable spiritual journey. It begins in isolated suffering and ends in communal hope. It acknowledges present pain while affirming future restoration. It grounds temporal experience in eternal reality. This spiritual movement reflects what psychologists call meaning-making, the human capacity to integrate suffering into a larger narrative framework. Viktor Frankl, who survived Nazi concentration camps, observed that people can endure almost anyhow if they have a compelling why. The psalmist demonstrates this process, finding meaning beyond their immediate circumstances. But Psalm 102 offers more than psychological comfort. It provides theological insight into God's relationship with time itself. The Psalm's superscription calls it a prayer of one afflicted, when he is faint and pours out his complaint before the Lord. The Hebrew word for afflicted, ani, can also mean poor or humble, suggesting that this prayer emerges from a place of complete dependence. This dependence acknowledges human frailty. My days are like an evening shadow, while recognizing divine permanence. Your years endure throughout all generations. The psalmist experiences time as rapidly diminishing, yet affirms God's mastery over all temporal processes. Contemporary physics confirms what the psalmist intuited. Time itself is not absolute. Einstein's relativity theory demonstrates that time flows differently depending on one's reference frame. Quantum mechanics suggests even stranger temporal properties at subatomic levels. While the psalmist lacked scientific language for these concepts, they grasped the fundamental truth that God transcends the temporal limitations that define human experience. This interaction between divine eternity and human temporality creates the tension that drives the psalm forward. The psalmist's suffering feels unbearably long. All the day my enemies taunt me. Yet against the backdrop of God's eternal reign, even the worst suffering has limits. Consider how this perspective might have sustained the exilic community. Their national catastrophe, viewed within human history, represented an existential threat. Yet viewed within God's purposes, it became a temporary, if painful, chapter in a longer story of redemption. The Psalm's emotional honesty paired with theological depth made it a crucial resource for later generations facing their own crises. When the Second Temple was desecrated by Antiochus IV Epiphanes in 167 BCE, Jews found in Psalm 102 a template for lament and hope. When Rome destroyed Jerusalem in 70 CE, early Christian and rabbinic communities again turned to this prayer. Throughout centuries of diaspora, Jewish communities recited this psalm during times of persecution. Its words echoed in Spanish synagogues during the Inquisition, in Eastern European shtetls during pogroms, and in concentration camps during the Holocaust. In each context, the psalm's movement from desolation to hope provided a spiritual pathway through suffering. Christian traditions similarly embraced this psalm. The rule of Saint Benedict prescribed it for Friday prayers, associating it with Christ's passion. Medieval mystics found in it a description of the dark night of the soul. Reformers recognized its testimony to faith that persists when feelings fail. But perhaps the psalm's most profound legacy lies in how it validates authentic emotional expression before God. Unlike Stoic philosophies that counsel detachment from suffering, or prosperity theologies that deny suffering's reality, Psalm 102 demonstrates that honest lament belongs at the center of spiritual life. Recent psychological research confirms the importance of emotional expression in trauma recovery. Suppressed grief often manifests as physical illness or behavioral dysfunction. By contrast, communities that create space for lament, whether through ritual, art, or communal gatherings, demonstrate greater resilience. The psalmist doesn't just express emotion, they direct it toward God as complaint. This practice of directed lament transforms passive suffering into active engagement with divine reality. Even accusations against God represent a form of relationship rather than rejection. What makes Psalm 102 particularly powerful is its refusal to resolve tension prematurely. The psalmist doesn't deny their suffering or leap immediately to spiritual platitudes. They sit in desolation, acknowledging its full weight, before gradually expanding their perspective. This pattern provides a template for authentic spiritual formation. Growth doesn't come through denying reality, but through facing it with God. The psalm teaches us to hold together seeming contradictions, present suffering and future hope, personal pain and communal identity, temporal limitation and eternal purpose. In our own era of disruption, marked by pandemic, political polarization, climate anxiety, and technological upheaval, Psalm 102 speaks with renewed relevance. Like the ancient exiles, we navigate environments where familiar landmarks have disappeared. We too need spiritual resources that neither minimize suffering nor surrender to despair. The psalm offers such a resource by anchoring hope not in circumstantial improvement, but in God's unchanging character. This distinction matters tremendously. When hope depends on specific outcomes, disappointment often follows. When hope rests in who God is, it sustains even when circumstances deteriorate. Consider the scientific concept of homeostasis, the body's ability to maintain internal stability amid changing external conditions. Spiritual homeostasis operates similarly, allowing believers to maintain core identity and purpose despite environmental flux. Psalm 102 demonstrates this capacity, showing how faith can stabilize when everything else shifts. This stability doesn't result from emotional numbness or intellectual denial. Rather, it emerges from the psalm's expansive temporal vision. By setting present suffering within eternal context, the psalmist gains perspective without diminishing pain's reality. Perhaps most remarkably, the psalm's final movement focuses not on the psalmist's restoration but on future generations. The children of your servants shall dwell secure. Their offspring shall be established before you. This generational perspective reveals profound spiritual maturity. Even if the psalmist doesn't personally experience Jerusalem's rebuilding, they find comfort in knowing others will. Their concern extends beyond individual vindication to communal flourishing. Such generational thinking characterizes wisdom traditions across cultures. Native American Iroquois considered how decisions would affect 7 generations forward. Ancient Chinese family systems emphasized ancestor veneration and descendant provision. Biblical faith similarly places individual experience within multi-generational covenant relationships. In our individualistic age, this perspective offers a corrective. When personal timeline becomes the sole measure of meaning, suffering often appears meaningless. When we see ourselves as links in an intergenerational chain, our suffering gains purpose as part of a larger story. For faith communities today, Psalm 102 models how to maintain identity amid cultural displacement. The Babylonian exiles couldn't practice temple worship, yet they preserved core faith commitments through alternative practices. Similarly, contemporary believers navigate environments increasingly unfamiliar with religious language and concepts. The psalm's dual emphasis on honest lament and transcendent hope provides a balanced approach to cultural engagement, neither retreating into bitter isolation nor surrendering distinctive identity. It acknowledges present reality while maintaining an alternative vision. As we conclude our exploration of this remarkable prayer, we return to its opening cry. Hear my prayer, O Lord, let my cry come to you. This simple petition contains profound theological insight. The psalmist believes God listens even when circumstances suggest otherwise. They trust divine attention despite feeling abandoned. This paradoxical faith, believing God hears prayers that seem to go unanswered, sustains spiritual life in its darkest moments. It acknowledges the mystery at faith's center, that God's ways transcend human understanding while remaining accessible to human relationship. Ultimately, Psalm 102 teaches us that authentic prayer holds together seeming contradictions, brutal honesty with unwavering trust, personal anguish with communal identity, temporal limitation with eternal perspective. It shows us that we need not choose between raw humanity and refined theology. True spirituality embraces both. In your own moments of desolation, when time itself seems to evaporate like smoke, this ancient prayer offers a pathway forward. It validates your suffering while expanding your vision. It anchors your experience in something larger than yourself. It reminds you that even when the familiar crumbles, God remains. Like Jerusalem rising from exile's ashes, new life can emerge from your devastation. Like generations who found hope in this psalm across centuries, you stand in a long tradition of those who've discovered light in darkness. Like the psalmist whose name we'll never know, your honest cry to God can become a gift to others still unborn. For in the economy of grace, nothing is wasted, not even suffering. Every prayer poured out joins the great chorus that rises throughout history. Every tear becomes part of the river flowing toward ultimate restoration. Every honest question opens space for deeper revelation. This is the enduring message of Psalm 102, that in bringing our full humanity before God, broken, limited, and confused as it may be, we encounter the one whose love transcends time itself. And in that encounter, we discover that we are neither abandoned nor forgotten, but held within a story larger than we can imagine. Before you go, I want to personally invite you to be part of our growing community here at Prayer Universe. If this video touched your heart or brought you peace, take a moment to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a prayer or message that can uplift your spirit. But most importantly, I'd love to hear from you. In the comments below, share just one word or phrase of motivation that this video inspired in you, whether it's hope, gratitude, peace, or something else. Your words matter deeply to us because they help guide the content we create for this channel. Together, let's build a space filled with faith, encouragement, and connection. Thank you for being here, and remember, every prayer counts. See you in the next one.